Hi, and welcome back to Hot Off the Press, a Continual. I'm going to be your host, Jim Nettles, and tonight we're going to be bringing a lot more for your to-be-read pile. So before we get started, let's go around and see who is bringing in some new work this evening. So, Mike, you're up first.
Hey, I am Michael Mammay. I am a military science fiction author mostly. Some other non-military science fiction coming as well. I'm the author of the Planet Side series with Harper Voyager, and I've got a couple new books that have just dropped.
Hildy?
Hi, I'm Hildy Silverman, former publisher of Space and Time and also short fiction author. My latest is coming out in the Now I See It's Reversed, Three Time Travelers Walk Into anthology.
Nope, it looks right for our side, so you're all good.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Mel?
Hi, I'm Mel Todd. I am a urban fantasy, urban science fiction, and fantasy author, and I've got a lot of stuff coming out here in the next year, both in paper, hardback, and audio.
And Elle Marie.
Hi, I'm Elle Marie Wood. I'm a dark fiction author, which is going to take some getting used to. I usually say psychological horror, so I'm trying this on for size. I have a new mystery novel coming out in August that I'll be talking about today.
So, Michael, let's start with you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about about both of the works you got coming? And you're on mute.
Yeah. Coming, they're already out. So the stuff that I have, my book that dropped in July, and I say book, it's only on audio in July, is The Weight of Command. And it's only on Audible because Audible paid me to do that. And it will be out from Falstaff in January in paperback and in ebook. But it is a military science fiction book about a lieutenant who is on a peacekeeping mission, and all the leadership from her organization, from her brigade, go to a dinner, and it gets blown up. And she is the only surviving officer in her brigade on this peacekeeping mission. And because they have an inexperienced officer now in charge of the whole brigade, everybody decides this would be a great time to try them. So it's her travails as she, as a 22-year-old, tries to lead a 4,000 person unit that would usually be led by a colonel, and she's a lieutenant. So that's that one. And then The Misfit Soldier came out in February with Harper Voyager in all formats. And that's kind of, if you imagine Halo meets Ocean's 11. So it's a heist novel set with power armor in a military science fiction setting, but it's not really a military science fiction book per se. There's some military science fiction scenes for sure, but it's more of a heist novel. Con man joins the army because he's running away from the mob, and he does not give up his old ways. So those are the two things that I've got going on right now.
Hildy, how about you? So you're part of Three Time Travelers Walk Into, an anthology. So let's find out a little bit about your story.
Sure, yes. So the anthology just came out a little while ago, like I think within the past several weeks. So the thing finding them together is that it had to be three people from history at random, whoever the author chose, traveling together through time. In my case, I chose Mary Todd Lincoln, Marie Antoinette, and Madame Marie Curie. So they are traveling through time as Nostradamus's angels, which is the name of the story. They're basically deployed to stop offenses against the true timeline. So in this case, they land in Paris, and they are faced with an uprising from the catacombs of zombies, and how they handle that, and who's really behind it, and etc. So it was a lot of fun to write, as you can imagine, and there's a lot of fun stories in this anthology, as you can see from a number of really good, talented authors. So I highly recommend people will enjoy it.
And we have had a couple of the other stories from the anthology on. So yes, it is definitely one you need to have. So Mel, you're on mute.
else? I have a bad habit of typing, and apparently when I type, I sound like a machine gun, so I try to remember to hit mute. I had my book 6 in my Twisted Luck series come out about 2 weeks ago, and it's doing pretty well. And you can see the cover behind me, but barely. It is in my Slice of Life urban fantasy series where there's never really a big bad. There's nobody you have to defeat or anything. Most of the time, it's dealing with things going weird and having powerful people thinking they can control you and you being really stubborn and not wanting to. But it's been out for about 2 weeks at the time of this recording, and I've already gotten over 500 reviews. So I'm pretty happy with that. And then I will have coming out here. I haven't figured out how I'm going to distribute them yet, but I have 2 of my novellas being recorded so that I'll have audiobooks on both novellas, and then my narrator is going to start recording book 5 of the series, which means if I don't get my butt in gear and start writing book 7 and 8, she's going to be done with book 6 before I get the next book out.
And Marie, you're dipping into a bit of the noir. So what have you got in your detective series?
But,
or your mystery series?
And it's not even a series. I can't promise that this is going to go on and on. It was
I've heard those
write.
words before. Maybe,
and that's true. And definitely for me. I wanted to say to Melisa, that's an excellent problem to have. Congrats. But so what we'll talk about today is I don't know, it was a lot of fun to write. It just kind of came from nowhere. It's called Mars, the Bandman, and Sarah Sue. And it's a mystery about a woman who's, 40 something, and she's kind of tired of the humdrum. And she's like, just going through life going, it's got to be something else. And while she's doing that, sighing and, kvetching and being frustrated, she stumbles upon a murder. So she sees some things she shouldn't have seen, and now she's got to try and, either she could go, do what most people would do, which would be to report it to the authorities. But she feels that she's in a situation where she can't really do that. And so she's got to figure out what she can do next and how she can get herself out of hot water, because she sees and she's noticed seeing. So she's kind of stuck.
So let's talk a little bit about the universe. What the kind of a world that people are going to fall into with the universe, with your characters. Now, Hildy, of course, you started alluding to this a little bit, and all the different stories about 3 time travelers walk into. Everybody's stories in their world's a little bit different. So what kind of world are people going to fall into with your story?
Well, in mine in particular, it's the modern world, but it's a obviously alternate timeline version where things happen that haven't happened in our world and shouldn't be happening. So they'll recognize, at least people who know anything about Paris will recognize some things, and they'll seem pretty ordinary, except the whole, zombie uprising and 3 women from history coming to fight them and slow them down. But otherwise, it's a pretty current modern setting.
Is anybody going to notice a zombie uprising at this point?
Probably not.
Mel, how about you? Because you've got a pretty expansive world and set of world building by the time we get into book 6.
So I love taking things and just twisting them. I do not write traditional stories at all. And in this particular world, it is basically Earth, but one step to the left of what we've got. And magic started appearing in about the 1850s. And so magic is a worldwide thing. It has affected everybody. Right now, it's looking like 35-40% of the entire population are mages. And it's interesting in that different countries control mages differently and everything else. And then I like to play with what you can and can't do. Mine is very much where we're humans. We love little boxes. We love to make sure everything fits in our nice little boxes. So if you're a mage in my world, you're required to go to college. Most higher powered mages have doctorates because you have to understand what you're doing at molecular or quantum levels to actually make magic work. But then the other stuff that I have fun with is I like writing things that I haven't actually seen in stories. For example, the only pregnant main character I have ever seen in an urban fantasy story was Kate Daniels for one book in Alona Andrews' Kate Daniels series. So I have my main character who's not only pregnant, she's a surrogate, plus magic, plus unicorns and gorgons and everything else. And it's just fun to throw things up in the air and not write what people are expecting. And this world is so complicated, and it's even going to get worse by the time the series ends. But one of the great things I've got to do, or get to do, is probably a better thing, is since this particular story is set starting in about 2016, I never say the exact years, but the technology is pretty obvious. I still have 200 plus years of history that I get to go write stories in. I get to write them in different countries. I'm looking forward to the fact that I get to write a thriller. I'm going to write some historical, not quite romance, but more of Anne Perry sort of things with Charlotte Pitt and Inspector Pitt, and just have fun doing stories worldwide in all these different genres.
So, Elle Marie, what kind
It's
of a
modern
world?
day. I'm sorry?
I said, what kind of world are we going to get? Are we going to fall into with?
Yeah, this is this is one of my first pieces that doesn't have anything supernatural happening whatsoever. So you're just gonna walk out and see your normal day, and that'll be the same thing that Sarah Sue's seeing. It's modern day. And it is it's funny because the location is, you can't put your finger on it, but there are at least 4 towns that will go, I think she's talking about here, because it'll be, I've lived in those towns, or I used to frequent those towns. And so I used a couple of the streets, and not by name, but by design of, the areas. And so making a left down this road will definitely look like what I just described off of that specific road. However, that's not the name of the road. And then the right that you take from that next doesn't look like what I just told you. So, it's kind of trying to immerse people, because they'll recognize something, but I don't want them to look at it and go, oh, I wonder, I don't want to create a traffic jam and have people looking for the body in the woods in the corner, So modern day, just something that we will all see. And that's what I did that because Sarah Sue is your everyday 40-ish year old woman. So I try to keep the two in sync.
Michael?
Yeah, so for the Way to Command, I kind of borrowed from like a UN peacekeeping mission where both countries have asked a third force to come in and be the actor between them, because they know that they'll go at each other, but they both theoretically want peace. So they call somebody stronger in to be that thing. So it goes back to the 80s with the US forces and the UN forces in the Sinai between Israel and Egypt and stuff like that, in Bosnia, before that got out of hand with Kosovo and all that, where the forces of the I4 came in, and they were between two forces, and there wasn't really a war going on. It was a peacekeeping mission, but everyone was cool with it. Like both sides were cool with it. People in the middle were cool with it. And then I wanted to create cultures that didn't mirror any of those actual cultures, because I don't want to steal from that stuff too much. So I kind of borrowed a little bit from Ursula Le Guin, which if you're going to steal from the best. For the Left-Handed Darkness, she's got these 2 countries that are set up in opposition of each other culturally. So I tried to take 2 countries that were culturally opposites, and they just think about things in a different way. They have different political systems. One of them is a patriarchy. One of them is not. One of them is kind of collective. One of them is capitalist. And just set them against each other, like in every possible way. And then stick this force of peacekeepers in between them and have both sides pushing on her, as well as some external factors to just try and make things as hard as possible for her. Because that's the point, right? You create this character, you put him in a situation, and you torture him. And that's a book. And that's kind of what I did there. But if you've been on a peacekeeping mission with the UN or, even with the US or any other force, you're probably going to recognize some of this because some of that creeps in from my own experience. But, I try to create two completely different cultures. And they're on a resource intense planet, right? Because why would we come and keep peace between them unless we wanted something from them, right? So if we were doing that in the real world, it would be oil countries. Right, we're going to go keep peace because we want the oil to keep flowing. Well, in this case, battery technology uses lithium. They have lithium mines, and we want to keep the lithium flowing up the space elevator and off planet to the rest of the galaxy. So that's why we're willing to spend this money and put this peacekeeping force there to keep the lithium going. So there's some parallels to the real world for sure, but it's really just a made up world with technology well beyond our own. The main character has an implant in her head that interfaces with, she's basically got Wi-Fi in her brain. Okay. And her brain has kind of got a little computer in it, and she can connect to all the systems and stuff and run them remotely.
Well, I mean, at the core of every story is the idea of the characters.
Yeah.
Yeah. We want to know who we're going to be meeting. So Mel, why don't we talk a little bit about the main characters that people are going to meet in your universe?
Human or not?
That is entirely up to you.
So my main character is Corey Monroe. She starts off at 19. The book I'm writing right now, she's in her early 30s. And she has a familiar named Carillion. Now, if you ever have seen a caracal, which is a type of very large cat, that's what Carillion looks like, except for some reason it honestly makes the cats look weird. Caracal tails are about this long. Carillion's is about twice the length of his body, and he's ruby red. And he is a cat in every sense of Dick Whittington's cat, where if he's sitting on the throne, he's going to look at the king and go, "Yes, I'm perfectly fine here. You can go away." And he talks. So you've got that. You've got Joe's best friend, you have Joe, who is Corey's best friend, and then Joe's partner, Sable. And then I've got a Gorgon, a unicorn, Carillion's mother, who is the size of a small Shetland pony. Needless to say, when these animals appear in public, they get lots of screams because literally this is a cat the size of a Shetland pony that's human level intelligent and has absolutely no problem intimidating or making people cry. In fact, all of them find it rather amusing because humans are weird. And the ongoing conversation about what human meat tastes like. They're firmly of the belief that hot sauce solves everything. I have no normal characters. All of my characters are weird. But Hildy, I was going to say, when you're saying who your main characters are, believe it or not, I'm actually related to Mary Todd Lincoln. She is actually my great something aunt. Hence
the Todd in your name. Oh, that's awesome.
Yep.
Oh, how cool.
Yeah, it's really funny. If you ever talk to somebody whose last name is Todd, over 90% of us go directly back to Mary Todd's brother, and that's where we all come from.
Wow, that is extremely cool.
So there's your trivia for the day.
Thank you. That's really something.
And Ian, how are you doing?
I finally made it in. I'm so sorry to be so late.
Well, if you want to do a quick intro, we've already started talking a little bit about 3 Time Travelers, but
Hi. Hi. Yeah, I'm the really late guy. I'm Randall Strock. I'm the publisher of Fantastic Books. That wonderful book cover that behind Hildy's head is our most recent anthology. And I'm so sorry I'm late.
Not the first time it's happened, won't be the last. So, Elmarie, why don't you talk a little bit about who we're going to meet? Let us know a little bit about them, a little bit about the setup.
Well, you're going to meet, again, I can't stress this enough. It's literally people that you've met in town. You very well could be one of these people. You've got a 40-something, year old woman who's married to a 40-something-year-old guy. They were high school sweethearts, and he was a football star in high school and then hurt himself and all the college, games and NFL future are just gone and all that's, and he's working at his dad's mechanics garage and kept doing it, like never changed that. And she stuck by him. And now at 40, she's looking back and going, was I asleep for all of those years? I don't even know how time passed. And so when we meet her, she's lamenting this lost life that she felt that she, just completely fell asleep on and didn't see passing by her. And I think a lot of people, not necessarily the details of, Sarah Sue, who is the main character, and her husband specifically, but I'm sure that a lot of us can look back and go, where did the time go? For whatever reason. Some of us look back decades and some of us look back 6 months. I got my glasses changed today and I thought I was just here, wasn't I? And they're like, it was about 1.5 years. And I'm like, what? And I don't know. I don't remember that. I literally feel like I just picked up my glasses the other day. So time has a way of doing that to us. And I'm traditionally a psychological horror author. And I said I was going to try and say dark fiction, but see, I've already failed. And my brand of writing is typically that I take the mundane, the commonplace, and I twist it, so everything looks normal until you turn your head and you catch something in your peripheral vision. And so that's exactly what happens for Sarah. I just tried this in the mystery space as opposed to where I am, my psychological horror space. And I found that it still works because we absolutely lose track of time, lose track of who we are, lose track of who our partner is and what we liked about them in the first place, and get stuck with the, dirty socks in the hallway or horrible table manner and get stuck in that world. And now all we are is irritated, right? So you can imagine her headspace when she walks out, because she's like, my goodness, this is really what's happening to me. I'm sitting here and I've been sitting here this long. And if I hadn't woken up today, I'd been sitting here for another couple of years. And as she's doing this lamenting, she comes across this horrible thing she shouldn't have even been there to witness, but she was. And we meet. So in terms of main character, she is the main character because we live in her head quite a bit, and it's a lot of fun in there. Her husband is an interesting guy. I'll be honest. I had a hard time letting her dislike him so much for so long because I kind of was okay with some of the stuff that he was doing, right? But the murderer, the murderers are murderers, right? I mean, they're who they are, and we just have to go with that. And that's who you're going to meet when you pick up this book. I mean, it's not a huge ensemble cast, but you won't need it. Not living in her head.
So, Michael, let's find out a little bit more about the people we're going to meet in your universe.
Yeah, so the main character, and it's told in the first person, the main character is Kira Markov, and she is a scout platoon leader, and she's 22 years old, and she is brash, hyper competent, very, very good at what she does, and she will tell you about it. And then we throw her into a situation where she's way, way over her head. So we basically, if you're taking a civilian equivalent, she is the best entry-level employee that you've ever had, and we're going to make her CEO overnight. Okay, and all the people who work there are still there. So she is there, and she is dealing with this old crotchety master sergeant who's kind of, who probably should be in charge, but he doesn't have the implant in his brain. He doesn't have the computer in his brain that she does, and he doesn't have the academy training that she's got, so he's not going to take over, but he's supporting her some of the time, right? So he's kind of a mentor character, a support character, and almost an antagonist all at once, right? Because he's got his ways of doing things. He's been in the military for 22 years. She's been in there for 2. So there's some challenges there, right? And every lieutenant who's ever been in the Army has dealt with those challenges. You're put in charge of a platoon, and your platoon sergeant 37 and you're 22. What are you going to do? All of a sudden you're in charge, sort of, right? And that's her situation too, right? She's in charge. But a lot of the people she's in charge of have a lot more time on the job and experience and maturity, really, than she does. So it's kind of part of how she navigates that. And then the other really important part of it is she's dealing with the leaders of the 2 countries that she's keeping peace with. And both of them, both of those, one of us is a patriarchy, right? It's run by all these old men and they see this 22-year-old woman in charge of the peacekeeping force, and you can imagine how that goes. And she doesn't love it, right? So she smarts off to them because she's not going to take any of their stuff, and she, of course, makes it worse. Because she's basically antagonizing the people who are in charge of the country because she didn't like them. And when you're 22, you do things because you don't like people, not because you're smart and doing what's best for your team. And that's part of her journey, right? Is getting.
Oh, no, I still do it now, and I'm way past 22.
Well, there you go. I mean, yeah.
I'm like, wait, you're supposed to learn to behave. I'm in the wrong
I wouldn't
place.
say she ever learns to behave. She learns to control herself and act in a way that is beneficial to her side, not out of petulance, right? So she still has the most powerful force on the planet, okay? So they can mess with her up to a point. They can push her up to a point, right up until they can't, right? And I don't really want to give too much of that away because it's kind of a key part of the third act. So we're just going to let that sit there. But obviously they're going to try and push for everything they can get, believing that they could take advantage. And part of her journey is getting through that. And then she has a very kind of eclectic team of soldiers around her squad that is her, her personal security detachment, the people who go with her everywhere, and her relationship with them, because they're about her age, but they're enlisted. And, they act like 22-year-old enlisted soldiers, and they have a good time. And they screw with her a little bit, and she screws with them, and but ultimately they're a team and kind of a found family kind of vibe to that. So it's kind of where we go with that.
So Hildy, a little bit of a different question here. How did you select your three people walking into, to be Nostradamus's angels?
So actually, I thought that through for a while. I was trying to decide who do I put together, and I kind of like the idea of three people with the same or similar names. And as I did my research, it turned out that it was remotely viable that all three of these women would have had a connection, or could have had a connection, in that they all spent a great deal of time in Paris. All three of them were transplants. Paris. They came from other places and wound up there for various reasons. They had tragic endings. And they were, most of them, especially Antoinette and Mary Todd Lincoln, were quite misunderstood in life and in history. They've been painted a certain way that actually, if you do the research, isn't necessarily true to who they were. Madame Curie to a lesser degree, but certainly there was some of that in there. So I like the idea of that combination, that they would have that commonality, even though they were from different eras and had very different lives, that they would have something that they could relate to, and even a common language, because all three of them would have been able to speak French. So yeah, that was most of it. I also like that the idea of from such different walks of life. Mary Todd Lincoln was very religious, very spiritual. Marie Curie was not any of those things. She was very science focused, agnostic. And then, of course, Marie Antoinette was raised in a very narrow, privileged world, and just, didn't know much about others at all. So that they all brought a little something unique and fun to the game.
So Ian, since you're here, do you want to tell us a little bit more about the anthology? What brought it about? What are some of the other kinds of stories we're going to find in Three Time Travelers Walk Into a Margarita?
Before I do that, I wanted to cue in on something Elle Marie said. She was talking about how you can completely lose track of time. I was editing a nonfiction collection by Alan Dean Foster and suddenly looked at the clock and realized, wait a minute, I was supposed to be somewhere half an hour ago. So, yeah, I can relate to that just a little bit.
You're welcome, Ian. I threw that up for you.
Yeah, thanks. right over the plate.
Nice
I like the
softball.
name drop. I like the name drop too. That's a really good one.
Mhm. 2 for 1.
Oh, yeah. Did I happen to mention that? Oh, silly me. What a publisher. But Three Time Travelers actually came about because Michael Ventrella showed up with the idea. And I liked the idea because he was the one who released the Virgins for me, which was a far more involved story as to where the book came from. This one, Michael just showed up with the idea, and I said, yeah, I think that one works. I wish I had a greater backstory to go with it, but it's simply a matter of finding a decent editor who can come up with a good idea that will inspire good writers to come up with excellent stories, and we seem to have done just that.
Good to know Michael's a decent editor. We'll let him know. Did you?
Well, that's what he gets for not being able to join us.
Yeah, I mean, since he's out also. So why don't you tell us a little bit about some of the other stories that people are going to find in the anthology?
Well, let's see. There's a wonderful story that is unfortunately very sad. And when I read through the book after Michael put it together and dealt with the authors individually, he sent me the entire package, and I read through it, proofread it, gave it a final go through, and had a couple of questions about this one story. And I talked to the author and I said, I've got a question here, here, and here. Also, by the way, I hate you very much because you've written a story incredibly similar to the story that I wrote for the anthology and submitted under a pseudonym. And apparently mine was the only one that got lost in Michael's inbox, so he never got around to reading it. But having read this really sad story, it's fine because it's much better than the story I wrote. And I went back and forth with the editor a bit because he wanted to make it a little less sad. He wanted to go on from the end point, which I thought was an incredibly moving end point. And we debated back and forth. And eventually I thought he won the debate. And I only found out at Balticon he thought I had won the debate. So the story runs a little longer than I'd originally read it, but it's still a very good, very moving story. Basically, how far would you go? How much of your own happiness would you give up in order to make the world a better place? It's David Gerrold's story. And it was, when you read it, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. It's there. That's the one that has stuck with me the most. Sorry, Hildy, I know you're here with us, but
that's okay.
his story from the book is the one that sticks with me most loudly. Was that anywhere near the answer to the question you'd asked?
Sure, we'll go with that theory. It's what moved you, and that's what's always important about a story is what grabs you. And I mean, is there another story out of the anthology that looks and says, yeah, it's maybe more of a happy ending? Or
well, that's it. When Michael first came up with the idea and we were putting together the campaign and all, I was thinking this was going to be a comedy book because the title, if nothing else, and I was expecting a lot of funny stories throughout the book. And there are a couple that are funny and amusing, but by and large, the authors gave us far more serious explorations of humanity and human interactions. So, I mean, they're good stories, and I'm sorry, my arms are on the table, shaking the camera. Good stories, which seems to be what people are looking for, the serious stories, and that's what they think is good. Me personally, I like good comedy too, but comedy doesn't seem to sell quite so well. But yeah, I mean, there's some upbeat, there's some funny, and there's Alan Steele's story. Would you follow a stranger into the broom closet at a Grateful Dead concert? It's an amusing take on the concept. And let me pull up the table of contents real quick because I'm 5 books down the line from that one already, just to remember what it was I'm talking about here. But I mean, David Gerrold's is the one that I point to first from this book. Also, Heather McKinney's story, Cornwallis's Gift, is an amusing take. I came in, as Melissa was saying, she's descended from Mary Todd Lincoln, which fascinates me because outside of science fiction, I'm a presidential historian, and my 3 books the published books are on presidential history. But excuse me, Cornwallis's Gift talks about George Washington and how Cornwallis tries to screw him over, which it's not quite what you expected in a funny way.
Well, diving back into adding to that to be read pile. So, El Marie, I'm going to hit you with this one first. One of the big questions, and one of the great joys as writers is always what rabbit holes we fall down. Every time we do a new book, every time we do a new project, there's always something that comes about that surprises us, that we learn from. And since this is kind of a new foray for you, what did you learn from this experience, or what surprised you about this experience?
Well,
other than putting the body in the woods for people to find, but it has a free copy of the paperback signed for you if you do.
That would actually be really funny. No, I definitely, so I told you that Sarah Sue's mind is a fun place to be. It truly is. And one of the things that she does is something that I didn't realize I do sometimes, not all the time, but enough until I started writing this. And then I started researching, I'll get to it. So she, how do I explain? She has like theme music and it playing in her own head. So you do something, not that you hear music, but you do something and you have like, I don't know what to call it. It's almost like a cheering squad, but it's your cheering squad. It's silent. No one else knows it. And it's yours, and you're pulling it from your youth. So it's some jingle from a television commercial, or it's something you heard on the radio, or a snippet of a song, or like a hair band not doing the line they're supposed to be doing in the song, but looking at you and saying something directly to you, something like that. So there's like slogans happening for her. And I didn't realize that does happen to me sometimes. Like I do, I literally do. And so what happened is I ended up trying to make up a guy because I didn't want to go, like it's too easy to just pick any hairband and then pick someone out of there. I wanted to make up a whole, person that was, a collection of all sorts of hairbands. And so I didn't realize I do that with like New Edition. Anybody know who New Edition is? It's an old, I shouldn't call them old because all of them are still living and they still perform. So let me take back that old thing because they're 2 years older than me, not old. But New Edition was a very popular group in the 80s and early 90s, right? And they've spun off to have this other group called BBD from 3 members who were in that group. Bobby Brown was in that group, just big group, right? And every now and then I've got some New Edition song that just plays. If I do something that I'm really pumped about, hey, I can hear Candy Girl is going. And I'm like, what is that? So I start looking them up. And I'm looking up performances on like YouTube because YouTube has everything. And then I'm looking at old videos from the 80s. And then I'm thinking, what was I doing at that time? And now I'm going to dig out and see if I have any clothes from that time. And then I'm calling people saying, hey, you have this? Because I found this. And now we're having videos with our neon and we're playing New Edition. And I'm like, wait, you're supposed to be writing. This was research. What happened? How did I get to New Edition? So yes, this is what happens. And it's fun. I will tell you now, the rabbit holes are a lot of fun. I did have to pull myself out of it and get back to writing, but I enjoyed myself immensely. And every time I realize that I'm having some theme music, I like allow myself to enjoy it for the moment. So I definitely learned a bit about myself. And I mean, it must have been days because I'm not playing. I had neon and I was talking to people about neon and we were just, no one was doing what they were supposed to be doing. We were going down memory lane.
And this is how you hear deadlines whiz by.
That's right.
Make
absolutely.
that lovely whistling sound.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Except for you, where they play a soundtrack. So
that's right. That's right. That's right. Sadly, that's right.
So, Michael, how about you? What was the thing that surprised you, or that you learned, or it kind of was the new thing that came out of this experience? Because again, you started creating this one for Audible, and then had to go back and write the book as well for Falstaff.
Yeah. Well, I've written for audio mostly, right? Because so my Planetside series, which has done really well. We sold 6 figures worth of copies on that series. 60% of that's been in audio. So military sci-fi does super on audio. So I'm always kind of focused on writing toward audio a little bit. And it's interesting because with this book, two things kind of came up with this book. One, I was trying to do 2 books in a year, right? Because the reason that this book went to Audible is because Harper turned it down. And so we got it exempted from my non-compete And I was all of a sudden able to, because when you're writing traditional and you're writing for Harper, you write one book a year, and that's that, right? I mean, because that's what they're going to publish. You can write as many as you want, but they're going to publish one book a year. Maybe, it might be 14 months, it might be, but it's about a book a year. Well, this gave me the opportunity to get 2 books in a year, which, means I get paid twice, which is great. So we're going to try that, right? Turns out I can't do that. And I did not know that I couldn't do that. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to finish this book on this day. I'm going to turn it in, and I'm going to start working on this book while I wait for the edits on the other book. And I just couldn't split my brain between the 2 books, and for some of you who write 6 books a year, this sounds ridiculous, but I never tried to do that before. And I had just gone to being a full-time author. I'm like, I have all day, every day. I should be able to do this. And as it turns out, I cannot. My deadline whizzed by twice, right? I had to ask for 2 extensions on this book to get it done. So I turned it in 4 months late. But we still published on the same day, because they had left a lot of time for edits. But because I took the extra time, I made the book better during that time, and really didn't need a whole lot of edits. And we kind of were able to they had pushed my timeline out, and then they started sucking it back in to us in July. And I was like, all right, that's a good sign. Like, and the editor's saying, hey, I think we can go earlier with this. I'm like, okay, I did good. But, for me, with my first books, I kind of write almost in a white room, right? I write really a lot of character, a lot of plot, a lot of action, very little setting. Like, I want to give you just enough setting so you know where you are, but I want to move the book because it's pace, right? I want to pace. I don't want to spend time. But with this book, because you have the 2 cultures colliding, when I wrote it the first time, it felt empty. And I needed to learn really how to expand on the setting and make these 2 settings in competition with each other. And I mentioned Ursula Le Guin, and she was kind of a key factor in me just taking a master class from one of the best that's ever done it. And if you haven't read Left Hand of Darkness, it's from 1969, and it still holds up. Like, it holds up today. Like you read it, and it says things about gender that people are still debating today. And she said that in 1969. I don't want to get too much into the politics of all that, but it's like reasonable. And it's the same argument somebody could be having today, and she was having it in 1969 on a page with herself, and it's just amazing. I learned a lot of stuff. I learn with every book that I'm writing.
Hildy, how about you? What did you learn? What came to you as you were exploring and working on your story?
I would say, well, the history of the characters involved, because even though I was writing obviously fictional, fantastical versions of them, they are based on real women who lived. And so doing the research, you can always fall down that research rabbit hole, learning about people or their times and things like that. It was just I found it very interesting. Mary Todd Lincoln had a very difficult and sad life. And she suffered a lot of psychological trauma because of it. And it really affected her and her belief system and the way she lived her life. So, I learned a lot more about her than I knew just from the cursory information we have about her from, your standard school history books, where she's kind of just, and yes, Lincoln's wife, because she was a lot more than that. And it was very interesting learning more about Marie Antoinette, who of course has this, let them eat cake reputation and all, and what led to that. And that actually before, well before the revolution in France, there was a time where she was extremely popular, almost like a Princess Diana popular, which I didn't know until there were some people at court who did not care for her. And she was implicated in a theft, in that, not that she had stolen something, but that she'd had something stolen, this very valuable necklace, and that someone else wound up being punished, I believe executed for it. And that sort of destroyed her reputation to the degree that one could arguably draw a line from that to her winding up in the guillotine. It kind of turned the whole country against her, so that, you know, she wound up meeting her end with everyone else in the aristocracy. So that was very interesting. And of course, learning more about Marie Curie and all she achieved, an achievement that ultimately cost her her life, because her discoveries with polonium and working with these things and radiation obviously led to her, you know, suffering, becoming extremely ill and dying from it. So anyway, it was just very interesting to learn more about the histories of these women who you don't always get the full story about them.
How about you, Mel? What'd you learn this time?
And I have friends who have really, really interesting contacts. Like one of my beta readers went, "Your plane crash is wrong. Here, I sent it to an aircraft controller, and he critiqued it and told me everything that I'd done wrong. The plane crashed." So, by the way, it is not easy to have a plane crash anymore in modern day America, in case you were wondering.
Good to know.
And I mean, to a certain point, it was absolutely fascinating. And then there's the writer brain of, oh my God, I don't want to change all of this stuff. I don't care. The plane crashes. Can we move on? No, we couldn't. I had to go do fuel dumps and say why all the engines blew at the same time. And then I had some betas who were telling me, oh no, planes survive water landings all the time. And this engineer's like, yeah, no, they almost never survive. Yes, the Hudson was perfect everything. Most of them, you go down the water, you shatter. And I'm like, that's what I thought. Yeah. Note to self, there's a reason why I might have a science degree. It is not in aerospace engineering in any way, shape, or form.
You have magic that can break everything.
It does. I use it a lot. I'm very good with hand wavium. Hand wavium exists for a reason. Hand wavium. It is the best element in existence. Hand wavium makes it work.
If you write in first person, you only have to be as smart as your main character.
Actually, nice. What I've been having so much fun doing is, so in my world, because it is a holistic world, and I always want to make sure that people realize it's not just happening to this one character, I put like these little blurbs on the top of every chapter. Sometimes they're news stories, sometimes they're things from that world's encyclopedia, sometimes they're, little gossip things. Well, one of my beta readers pointed out that in book 1, note this is book 6, book 1, I had said that the largest something could be was like 6 inches. Well, she's making it like 600 meters. I'm looking at this going, I can't retro 5 novels, 100,000 word plus novels. And I went, oh, wait, I've got this. I go pull up one of my little blurbs, and it went, we apologize, but in a previous version of this, we stated that the largest rip ever created was 6 inches. This was due to a translation error. The largest ever recorded was actually 6 meters. We apologize for any confusion. So that's nice. What I put in the top of the book stuff to explain why something that was reported earlier was conflicting with what I was saying now, because I'm going, I couldn't figure out any other way to do it other than to just say, hey, by the way, we were wrong.
Disney retcons all the time. So
retconning is a thing. So, now, see, the bonus geek points is if you can tell from which TV series retconning comes from. I know. Do you know, Jim? Oh, come on, you should know this.
Well, you mean other than Star Trek?
Nah,
on a regular basis?
Star Trek didn't use the words retcon.
Now I'm going to be old. I got to edit this out.
It actually came up in the Torchwood series.
Oh, God,
with
you're
John
right.
Barrowman. Because remember, they would retcon people to make them forget what they had seen. And you should know this.
Of all people, yes, I'm aware. Fine, maybe I'll leave it in. We'll see. So,
You just tag John in it and say, by the way, John, we were talking about you. It'll be fine.
So, Ian, how about you? What did you learn pulling this particular anthology together?
Well, I was actually going to talk about a completely different rabbit hole I wandered down yesterday, because the result was 1,200 words written about the comma, but the rabbit hole was 4 hours deep into the tariff of 1872, along with the preceding 3 tariffs. I'm writing a book on punctuation.
Wow.
Yeah.
The semicolon. Yes or no? Sorry.
The semicolon's the tough one. It's the serial comma that I am quite emphatic about. It is required. And don't fight with me because I'm the editor. But what did I learn on this book? I learned that there are a lot more people writing now. That's like I said, I thought it was going to be mostly a comedy anthology, and there was a lot more serious in it than I expected, because the authors found a lot more ways to comment on the human condition than I expected they would have.
Well, guys, it sounds...
Authors are tricky like that.
Yeah, aren't they? I mean, I get it. I'm an author too. I actually, the character I was most recently writing about was Grigner and the narrator and the audience, but that's a different book that's coming out later this summer.
Yeah, well, we'll get you on that one too. We'll give you half an hour lead time.
Yeah.
Well, guys, sounds like we've got a lot of stacking up for people's to-be-read piles. But before we get out of here, let's make sure everybody knows where to find these books and to find you guys. So, Michael, we'll let you go first.
Yeah, I am Michael Mammay on all the platforms. My website is michaelmammay.com. Twitter, I'm at Michael Mammay. Facebook, at Michael Mammay. My name is an SEO dream.
Hildy?
As someone who works with SEO, you're right. That's a great name. You can find more information about me and what I'm up to at hildysilverman.com. And Ian can plug where the book is, but it's published by Fantastic Books. And I know it's certainly on Amazon.com, and he can tell you where else.
Mel?
You can find me at badashpublishing.com, and it's Ash, good Ash, bad Ash. I'm the one with the gun. It's Bad Ash Publishing. My books are available mostly on Amazon right now, and if you are headed to Dragon Con, I will be at Dragon Con in Atlanta this year. So come by, say hi. I am on lots of panels, and I will either be drinking or regretting drinking. It's usually one of the two.
You're supposed to be in the dealer room. Marie.
Yeah, again, regretting drinking or drinking.
Well, you can find me at elmariewood.com. And if you go there, you can find all of my social media. The books are available wherever books are sold. So you can also link to it from elmariewood.com.
Ian?
Like Michael, my name is unique on the internet. So go looking for Ian Strock or Ian Randall Strock. They're all me. And IanRandallStrock.com is my personal page, and fantasticbooks.biz, not .com, but .biz is the company website where you can go to find all of the books we've published, including most recently 3 Time Travelers Walk Into, which is available in all major bookstores. We don't yet do physical distribution to bookstores because I've seen too many small presses go out of business with that, but we can be ordered through all of them because we're distributed by Ingram.
And I've had the pleasure of being your host this evening, Jim Nettles. You can find me at jamespnettles.com, authoressentials.net, authoressentialsworkshops.com, the speculative fiction academy.com, which Marie should have mentioned.
Oh, yes. Did you see my look too? I'm just watching you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what?
Yes, I did.
Speculative-fiction-academy.com. Come learn about all sorts of stuff. Sorry about that, Jim. Go ahead.
No. And then, of course, here at ConTinual, and of course, you can find me on Facebook. Occasionally, I show up in that hive of scum and villainy that is Twitter, and who knows, wherever else I may show up. And we will see everybody again soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.